All right, guys, so Miss Batya Ungar Sargon, I hope I pronounced her name right, from Newsweek, went on Brian Stelter's show to discuss her new book about woke media and how it is undermining democracy. Now, I absolutely love this conversation because it actually really kind of reminds me of a point that essentially I tried to make the other day on Black News Tonight with Mark Lamont Hill about how this race conversation is purely just a distraction, and it literally does not matter in the grand scheme of what actually is affecting everyday Americans. And the crazy part about this is that the media's insistence on focusing on race, while at the same time trying to deny that racial indoctrination is going on in school, while at the same time also saying that critical race theory isn't taught in school, and trying to make it seem like parents are dumb and that their concerns are not important. Again, not only is a distraction, but it is also backfired on the liberal media by them, again, focusing this conversation on race and how any opposition to woke indoctrination in school is simply just white supremacy, which is really to distract from what's actually really going on. And in the process of doing that, they have showed their elitism, right? And how they have abandoned the working class and the concerns of working class citizen. Now, Miss Ungar Sargon went on Brian Stelter to explain this to his face, right? And Brian Stelter is going to act like he doesn't really know what she's talking about. But right before this segment, he actually was literally just talking about how this whole critical race theory thing is made up and blah, 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 blah. The same thing that the liberal media has always been saying. So I actually want to play these two clips for you guys because it really does demonstrate the point regarding how media elitism led to what happened in Virginia. Take a look.
Yeah, let me say how I feel about this and tell me if y'all disagree. It seems to me there's real, obviously very real issues. We all know it. Every parent knows it with involving schools in the era of the pandemic. Real issues about learning loss. Real authentic issues about school board and curricula. But then there's also this apocalyptic narrative that comes from right-wing media, including Fox, that is out of proportion, that is exaggerated. Seems to me, Natasha, both are true. And you can see it in the way CRT has been redefined. Critical race theory is a real thing. It's a real thing. It's taught in colleges. Academics study it for a living. But now that phrase has come to mean something very different in our political ecosphere.
Yes, and what's interesting is that so many of these debates are old.
Oh.
they're just rehashed, right? When I was a local news reporter, some of the most intense stories were school board meetings, and they were about, busing kids from the city into the suburbs. So these are America's issues with race and identity, and this sort of this moral outrage that just gets repackaged for a new era. So hold on,
you're saying when the top issue is called education, the top issue is race.
It's actually race, and it is our job as journalists to provide that historical context so that our readers just don't take that headline and say parents' rights, and then it becomes this debate about what the people with the agenda actually want us to debate versus this larger picture that we're aware of and we should know.
How does what you're describing as bad news, how did it shape election results on Tuesday?
So I felt that Tuesday was a really good advertisement for my book, because my book is arguing that a lot of this conversation around wokeness is actually about class. We are hiding a class divide in America. We are hiding the just disgusting levels of income inequality in America. We are hiding the total dispossession of the working class of all races by focusing on a very highly specialized academic language around race. And I think what happened, Glenn Youngkin's victory was a perfect example of this. The media's response to Youngkin's victory is literally the reason that he won, right? How did they respond?
There's 100 medias, 100 reactions. You're pretty overly generalizing, I think.
Let me get more specific for you, okay? Because I have to say, I have to admit, having watched CNN all week, there's been a lot of very, very, very good genuflection on this front. But what happened right after the election was you saw host after host after host on MSNBC saying, oh, this is a victory for white supremacy, right? White supremacy wins again. Racism wins again. When, the lieutenant governor that Youngkin won with will be the first black woman to hold that job. When Glenn Youngkin managed to flip majority black districts, when he managed to get between 40 and 50% of Latino voters, are all of those people white supremacists? Of course they're not. They're people who are worried about, number one, the economy, right? And number 2, schooling. And it seems to me it is such a self-own to tell people who are worried about the economy that that is white supremacy, right? You are essentially criminalizing the views of working class Americans. And you saw the same thing with the conversation around critical race theory, right? You saw all of these pundits being like, these people don't know what critical race theory is. That is not a political statement. That is a class statement. They are not educated enough to be opposed to critical race theory. How dare they oppose it?
Yeah, so she's 100% spot on, right? And in that first clip, you see exactly what she's talking about. That lady in the first clip basically said, well, parental rights actually means race, right? She's basically implying that the Virginia governor race, essentially when parents talk about, hey, parents' rights and, parents having a choice in regards to their kids' school. Well, no, they're just racist, right? That's essentially what she's saying, okay? And again, this comes as the liberal media, all they want to talk about for the last week is Virginia and so-called white supremacy, right? And that the outcry against critical race theory is really just white supremacy. And like Miss Ungar Sargon here was explaining to Brian Stelter, this is the problem, right? This is why you lost, okay? And Brian Stelter tries to sit there and act like, oh, well, who are you talking about with the media's claiming that Virginia was white supremacy when you literally just had a panel on that literally just said, oh, no, this parental rights is just code for race, right? Just like Juan Williams wrote that article that said, again, parental rights is just code for white race politics. And them doing that along with telling people that critical race theory isn't in school and wanting to focus the conversation around this, again, highly technical topic that they swear up and down is only taught in college shows their elitism, right? They're literally telling people your concerns don't matter. What you're saying is either made up or it's just white supremacy, right? That's what they're saying. We're telling you what you see is happening in schools and what you know is happening in schools, or we're telling you that's not real, right? We're telling you that's not real, okay? While at the same time continuing to try to talk about race, right? And how, it's white supremacy. And that, in my opinion, effectively is a distraction from the real issue, right? It creates a circular conversation about race, because ultimately, at the end of the day, these parents, in my opinion, it's not about white supremacy. It's simply about they just don't want kids learning about race in school, and I 100% agree with them. We shouldn't be learning about race in school. It is a waste of time, just like all these conversations are, right? 100% a waste of time. Every single conversation about CRT, specifically in regards to telling parents that it's not being taught in school, even though we all know what their actual real issue is, which is woke indoctrination. That debate I had with Martin Lamont Hill was a waste of time, because his audience, people in the comment section, swear up and down, you are so ignorant on critical race theory. You know nothing about critical race theory, right? You know nothing about it. However, throughout that whole conversation, we were not having a conversation about critical race theory, because critical race theory, again, is a highly specialized academic topic, right? That talks about examining our institutions and our laws through the lens of race. That is different than talking about whether or not race should be taught in schools. But yet, Black News Tonight decides that we're going to title the video as a debate on critical race theory, and we never talked about critical race theory. So now everybody in the comment section of that video thinks that we're having a conversation about critical race theory when we're actually really not. And then these same people, right, will turn around and get on conservatives for saying that, hey, talking about race in school is critical race theory, when they literally will frame conversations about not teaching race in school as opposition to critical race theory, right? Again, what I'm saying is that out of all this conversation about critical race theory, most people have no clue what it is. Even the people that support it don't really know what it is, right? And at the end of the day, it's just a waste of time when we could be talking about way more important issues like the economy, like immigration and crime, right? And foreign policy and things like that, right? And really, at the end of the day, the opposition to critical race theory being taught in school simply is just parents saying, we want our kids to learn about stuff that's actually important, right? We want our kids to learn about reading, writing, math. Our kids are stupid. Like, we don't have time to be learning about all this other stuff. They're talking about race and all this other stuff. We don't have time for that. That's all opposition to critical race theory being taught in school is that we simply don't have time to talk about it. If you want to learn about it in college, go for it. But in K through 12 public schools, we have way more important things for kids to be learning about than that. It's really that simple. Now, I do make a lot of videos about race, admittedly, but most of the videos I make is pushing back against the narrative, right? It's a pushback against the narrative. And I think it's more of a productive conversation outside of talking about how racist everybody is, right? Okay? And this is why I talk about a little bit of everything. This is why I talk about the economy. This is why I talk about crime. This is why I talk about some foreign policy stuff. This is why I talk about a lot of different topics, okay, for that very reason. But again, the mainstream media, on the other hand, they have this tendency to just focus on things that truly and really do not matter. They literally just started talking about inflation, the supply chain crisis. The only reason is because they ran out of ammunition with January 6th. Remember, they tried to play that up for literally 8 months straight as the biggest threat to this country until Afghanistan. Afghanistan happened. Obviously, the establishment media is against Biden pulling out on that. That's the only thing Biden has done that's against the establishment. So they went in on that for a little bit. Then they started to talk about inflation and the supply chain crisis where they didn't have anything else to talk about. Now the new boogeyman is opposition to critical race theory, right? Being taught in schools. Even though they swap it now, it's not taught in schools. And they know damn well what the conversation is really actually about, right? Which is teaching race in schools. But instead of acknowledging that and actually having a conversation about that, right? And why do we need to talk about race in school? I think it's 100% unnecessary. But instead of actually even talking about that, they don't even want to have that conversation. They just want to say that anybody that's opposed to teaching critical race theory in schools is a white supremacist. Again, and ultimately at the end of the day, like Ms. Ungar Sargon said, that's a self-own for the media. Because the media continue to tell parents that it's not real, you're stupid, has empowered them to go out there and vote. And they're voting based off of the economy. And they're voting based off of education. Because these things matter to them, right? And when you continue to say that these things that matter to them is simply just white supremacy, again, you're not doing anything but working against what you claim you want, which I tried to explain the other day, right? You can sit here and pretend like it's not happening. You know, put your finger in your ears, close your eyes and say you're making it up, right? And if you want to keep doing that, be my guest. However, this honestly is going to lead to a red wave. It's going to lead to a red wave and a massive backlash against the woke mainstream establishment because of their refusal to actually acknowledge the concerns of everyday working class Americans because they're elite. They're classism. That's what it is. That's all it is. It's classism in disguise. You need to worry about what we tell you to worry about. You need to worry about January 6th, right? That's what you need to worry about. That's what they told you that we need to worry about for literally 8 months straight. Why, again, the economy is going to hell, right? Inflation crisis, crime, border, issues that affect all Americans of all races. No, January 6th, right? That's what you need to be worried about. Again, these media people, bro, and these so-called academics, they're working against themselves. And honestly, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. If they want to keep doing this, be my guest. Keep acting like Brian Stelter and all these other people that, oh, it's just made up and blah, 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 blah. It's simply just white spread. Keep doing it, right? Keep doing it. But don't be surprised when that red wave come next year. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.